Good morning and welcome to session 2 of Conscious Discipline. Today in this session, we will be talking about becoming brain smart start. In this session, we're going to learn a few things. So this is just going to give you a guide of what we're going to cover today. We're going to understand that permanent behavior change requires us to manage our inner states so that we can change how we respond to others. I know we talked a little bit about that in session 1, but today we're really going to dive into how important it is to manage our inner states. And so we'll kind of break that down, and we'll talk about how our inner state dictates certain behaviors. We're also going to look at different ways to explore how to be a co-regulator with children. We want to strengthen self-regulation skills for ourselves as the adult so that we can model that in our classrooms with our little ones. We're going to talk about identifying the skills and behaviors of survival state, emotional state, and executive state. I gave a little glimpse of what that's like in session 1, but today I'm going to break down in this session all 3 brain states and help you get familiarized with which state, in which state there's a developmental question. And you'll be able to recognize that after today. We'll break down some different examples and scenarios. And then we want to talk a lot about, at the very end, how we can use conscious discipline, how we can use that brain state model to integrate and wire the brain for optimal development. And we know that social emotional learning is so important for children, especially at a young age. And what we have found and what the research says is the more and more we work on creating that brain optimal development and we integrate that together, that their academics would come a lot easier if we met those social emotional learning components. So let's just start with our pre-learning survey just to see where your knowledge base is before we get going into this session. So get your papers out, and on a scale of 1 to 5, what would you think about this? What are your thoughts about this? Your state dictates your behavior. On a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being strongly agree and 1 being strongly disagree, you're going to put a 3 for in the middle. So how do you feel about this? Your state dictates your behavior. Give you a few minutes here. Okay, number 2. Discipline problems prevent us from teaching necessary social skills. On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being strongly disagree and 5 being strongly agree. Discipline problems prevent us from teaching necessary social skills. And question 3, teaching self-regulation is more important than teaching academics, especially in the early years of life. On a scale of 1 to 5. Okay, number 4, free play is overrated and has little impact on the development of self-regulation. How important is that free play? How important is that to integrate that into the classroom, into that culture that you're trying to create, that compassionate culture? And the last question, on a scale of 1 to 5, connections with others build neutral pathways from the lower centers of our brain to the higher centers of our brain. Connections with others build neutral pathways from the lower centers of our brain to the higher centers of our brain. What's your thoughts around that? 5 being strongly agree and 1 being strongly disagree. Okay, so hopefully you can see just a little bit of kind of the topics we're going to cover here today and see where your knowledge is. So when we're talking about becoming brain smart start, there are, and I think I mentioned this in another session, but there are, when you think about conscious discipline with that brain state model, There are several classroom structures that are integrated into the classroom setting that allow children to use or to practice these skills that we're trying to incorporate and to the culture that we're trying to cultivate within our classrooms. So when we're thinking about becoming Brain Smart Start, we think about that first question that we asked, that I asked you, is what is your state dictates a certain behavior? And one thing we want to remember too is when we focus on 9 times out of 10, when we see a certain behavior, a lot of times the first thing we do is we focus on the behavior instead of the state first. So what does that look like? For me, I can remember in the classroom, and I think I've mentioned this, that even certain behaviors immediately, if I would see them, because out of my fear of someone hurting another one, or just that controlling, trying to control the classroom, which I know is not, wasn't the best practice for me. But a lot of my teaching strategies fell on to the opposite of this, is I did not focus on my state, and I focused on the behavior first. So what conscious discipline does is it reminds us that we have to focus on our state and then the behavior second, because our state dictates that behavior. So what's that look like too? When you're thinking about slowing down the clacker. So internally, our state, when we see a certain behavior, sends us into a fit of rage or our anxiety levels are up or whatever the case may be, and we see something happening. So thinking about, even if you're not in the classroom, think about a time that you've been triggered here recently by someone's behavior. And our natural instinct is to react. We see a behavior or someone calls us a name or someone upsets us, and we immediately go to this state. And what we want to do with conscious discipline is help teachers, help educators see that the behavior has to come second. So self-regulation requires us to put the pause between that stimulus and that response. When we talk a lot about the importance of deep belly breathing and what that belly breathing does, when you're really getting into that breathing and really using your diaphragm and in through your nose and out, that requires us to stop that fight or flight that causes us to react and have that response to the behavior. Self-regulation is so important. You know, if self-regulation, and I want you to think about just you in general and answer this question, you know, how many of you all had self-regulation modeled to you by another adult when you were being raised, when you were growing up? For me, it wasn't modeled in a positive way. My version of, you know, self-regulation, if that's even what it was called, was to just go into another room when I was having a moment and try to calm myself down as a coping mechanism. I didn't have that other adult, as we talked about in session 1, that it takes, or we'll talk about here later on in this session, about that it takes 2 people to regulate. I did not have that in the early years of life. Self-regulation is a top predictor of life success. And we've just said this, that it's a huge indicator. It's so important during the early years to help with the early academics. So just a reflection of that, just kind of taking it a step further, you know, how was that modeled for you growing up? And how do you think, you know, your experiences with that growing up, how do you think that's going to help you further on down the road? And when you're in the classroom and you're trying to help these little ones self-regulate through big moments of upset. So just take a minute and just think about that. What are your thoughts with that, around that topic? And as I just mentioned, and if you think about this, you know, I'm not a good singer, but if you think about the song, "It Takes Two, Baby," that helps you remember that it takes 2 people. It takes two to help regulate those emotions. Okay, so if you're thinking about what does that look like in early childhood, well, children to about 6 or 7 years of age, depending on how mature they are developmentally, they don't have that inner speech that we have that says, whoa, slow down, I've got this, I can handle this. That's why when we say that it takes 2 people, they have to have someone model that for them. You know, self-regulation requires our inner speech to regulate those emotions. I don't know about you guys, but I know especially us women, we have that negative self-talk. You know, it's a constant struggle, that negative self-talk of maybe telling us that we're not enough, or all these emotions, because us women like to live in emotional state. But thinking about, you know, we can talk ourselves out of things. We can talk ourselves into things. We choose to cope in different ways. But you got to think, these little ones, these little children, they don't have that developed. It's not developed yet. So our inner speech must regulate our inner speech. So thinking about that and taking it a step further, how does that relate to you in your childhood? How was that for you? Did you have that other person? So just kind of wrapping your head around that. If you want to take a minute just to reflect or pause the recording, just want to get you in that mindset. Just kind of look back on what it was like growing up, and how can you use those tools, whether for the good, how can you use that in the classroom setting? So if you think about that inner speech, I put this picture in here because it's a constant reminder of, you know, how my life is. No, no, but this is kind of like, if you think about that inner speech, right, that governs the behavior. When you think about this too, and that piece that I'd already mentioned, that with the children of a certain age, they develop that ability over time, but again, they don't have it in the early years. So if you think about that, what we have a job to do as adults, you know, we are the co-regulator for children. So with that, we have to help them co-regulate, to help them manage their own emotions. One really great resource that I would recommend, and I will probably, I could pull that up for you if we have time. If not, I can send you the link. But one of a great resource that would help us even understand as adults, that I've used for book studies, is called Managing Emotional Mayhem. And it's a book written by Dr. Bailey. And really the purpose of that is for us adults to walk through this and understanding why we do what we do with our own emotions and how we manage that. Because if we don't understand as adults, as early educators, as parents, whatever our role is, babysitters, whatever the case may be, if we don't understand what to do or how we manage our own emotions, we can't help children manage their own emotions in ways that are healthy for them. One of the things that they have in this book is what we call, or what Dr. Bailey calls, are the feeling buddies. So they're like these little gingerbread cutouts. This is an activity that I've done with some teachers. But these are, the feeling buddies are something that comes from the book, Managing Emotional Mayhem. But it's a structure that you can implement within the classroom. But really the whole purpose of that is to teach children, hey, I've got this feeling, coaching them through it. Where does this feeling come from? What does it feel like? And that way they have time to reflect. And they can go, oh my gosh, so when I feel that feeling again, what can I do when that feeling comes? So that's just the structure, and we'll talk about that further on down, but I wanted to show you that the Feeling Buddies curriculum is a great way to integrate that within the classroom. So one thing, we've talked a little bit about, you know, the importance of understanding the different brain states in that model piece. And we'll break that down, but looking at how important is that for learning, and how important it is to remind ourselves that we need to operate on the front part of our brain in that executive state. And so there are tons of life skills. I've got two slides here that I'll show you that are all executive skills, that functioning executive skills that we need to have as adults, that children need to have. And if you look at these, I'll never forget the first time that I saw this list, I thought, oh my gosh, here I am in my 30s, and I'm like, am I supposed to be good at some of these? Some of these I struggle with still even today. So looking at this is a great reminder of, oh my gosh, if I would have just had someone help me meet some of these skills, or help me through these skills, that I could have been a little bit better. No, but looking at this, just as kind of a layout, Dr. Bailey has tons of different acronyms that help you remember things, which I think is really good because that's how my mind kind of operates, how my brain functions. But if you look at this acronym, a top wife makes good tea. Okay, and a top wife makes good tea stands for all of these executive skills. Look here, I have a whole nother slide. So that helps you kind of remember in what order of skills that we need. And there is a great resource online on the Conscious Discipline website, in the book portal, that really breaks down by developmental level. And so I'm going to send that to you guys in a link, but it really kind of breaks down different development. So at what point, 0 to 3, all the way up until, as they get older, of what skills should be mastered at that time. It just gives you kind of a glimpse and a breakdown of when the optimal learning becomes for all of these different skills. So let's take a look at these skills. We have attention, time management, organization, working memory, that impulse control. Conscious Discipline talks a lot about just different suggestions on how we help children with that self-control, that impulse control, and different strategies and techniques that you can use. I know one thing that's really helpful with children teaching that self-control piece, that impulse control, is to practice maybe stop and go games, red light, green light, having children hold up a stop sign and a go sign as they're walking down the hallway. Just practicing that control piece. We have to help them with that. Flexibility. Empathy is one of my favorite topics to train on, because there's so many resources that Conscious Discipline has given that can help teachers and educators in the classroom. And even myself, I've mentioned 2 resources already: the Feeling Buddy Kit, Managing Emotional Mayhem, but understanding how others feel and see it from their point of view. I know before all of this life transformation that I've been on through Conscious Discipline, I have thought for years I was so good at empathy and understanding, and I wasn't. And I discovered that about 4 years ago, and really had to change my mindset on that, because that's a skill that I want to be good at so that I can help my children. I wish I would have had that back in the classroom. I know that if I had that skill and have had years of practice before I was into the classroom or even used it in the classroom, I know that a lot of those behaviors that I focused on day in and out, I could have seen them differently and been able to use these skills just like that if I had known this early on in the early years of my career. I've been in this field for a long time, and so there are lots of things that I could go back and say, gosh, I wish I had that. So empathy is one. Goal achievement, task initiation, emotional control. All of these are skills that we, as educators, as leaders, as people who have influence, no matter if you're a parent or whatever your role is, we all have influence, and we all have the capability and abilities to help children get success, set them up for success, to have these executive functioning skills. So important. They're so important. I'm going to go back to this because I know it's a lot of information on these 2 slides for you guys to take a picture if you'd like to. I know what that's like for you to get a lot of good information. You don't have time to jot it down. So I'm going to hold this for a second to let you take a picture, and then I'll go to the next slide for you to grab a picture of that one as well. Okay, now we're shifting on to the brain. So we want to look at all 3 states of the brain, okay? And what Dr. Bailey has done is she has so beautifully color-coded the different parts of the brain to help us remember what state we're talking about, or what state we are in, so we can remember that. She's given them a color, she's given them a developmental question, and she's given us a metaphor to help us remember all 3 parts of the brain. So let's start from the bottom. We want to look at, we're thinking about, the goal of Conscious Discipline. There is to integrate social emotional learning to create a compassionate culture, right? So that we can help children emotionally regulate themselves, but also create that sense of connectedness, right? So that they can get to the top front part of their brain where they can learn all of those skills that we just talked about. So when we're thinking about survival state, we want to look at the atomic nervous system of our brain, that fight or flight that says there is a wolf or tiger coming after me and I don't feel safe. Inside my body, I do not feel safe. In that part of the brain, that's what we're asking. That's what a child is saying. I don't feel safe and I need some tools that are going to help me. When we're looking at survival state, the metaphor we want to remember, I want to go back to this. We've got to go back to that clacker. I know that in the very beginning of this training, my eyes were completely open when I realized, oh my gosh, my internal clacker is like this all the time because there's always a threat coming after me. And a lot of that has to do with that controlling nature or quality, or I don't think it's a quality, but it's a characteristic that I have I'm not proud of. But when I feel like I don't have control over a situation, then that's where I stay. I stay in survival state. What we want to do and recognize with children and even within ourselves, because how many times have we been in survival state? You know, survival state is they are nonverbal cues. So how do we recognize that in an adult? In an adult, it can be just them folding their arms, folding their arms, not saying anything, or their face is kind of like, or their heads down, or we shut off, or we shut down. Can children have the same behaviors? Yes. So anything in survival state, any behavior that you see is going to be nonverbal. So for a child, that may be a kiddo coming into the room and maybe have their head down and they're not talking. That may be a child who's running underneath a table or a chair. It could be a child who comes in and maybe has like a sweatshirt or hoodie or something over their head and they're, kind of trying to hide their eyes. Everything in survival state, every behavior you see is going to be nonverbal. When it shifts to the emotional state, so when it shifts from the brainstem to the limbic system of the brain, that's when you start to see certain different things. You're going to start to see words. Okay. You're going to start to see the name calling, the sassiness, they're going to start getting lippy, just put it that way. And so when they have shifted to that part of their brain, they're simply asking, I need to know that I'm loved. I need to know that I am connected with you. I don't feel like I'm loved. And so in that state, in the limbic system, that's what they're asking. That's the developmental question. So again, survival state, we're going, hey, I'm not safe. I've shifted to the limbic system of my brain. I don't feel connected. I need some skills. I need some tools that can help me get there, right? So when we think about what is that, what can help us? Well, I'm going to tell you, in the emotional state, okay, some of you may not remember what this is, but this is a CD-ROM. So in our emotional state, these are the false messages from our childhood that have been programmed into our brain, right? We have to rewrite that. We have to rewrite the messages here. That's why I keep going back to this integrity piece of this entire program, that this is a adult first model. We have to go back here. So when I suggested earlier, man, that Managing Emotional Mayhem resource is so helpful to help you as the adult coach your own self through these own emotions, right? So what does that look like in a child? Child comes into the room, they're in survival state. Then they start to say, I don't like you, you stupid poopy head. Now they've shifted to emotional state. We get the opportunity to use skills to help them get to that front part of that brain, that prefrontal lobe that says, what can I learn from this? In that executive state, that's when we look at a child's behavior with love, the power of love, the power of intention. What is my intention? My intention is to teach this child, to coach this child, to help them learn something new, because they may not have skills that can access they may not have the tools where they can access all of these skills. Okay. So one piece, and you're gonna see this slide a lot through each session, but I want to give you a snapshot. This page came out of the Conscious Discipline book, but I like to show this because I love how, if you could see right here, how it's really broken down into how can we use these in all three brain states. How can we integrate safety, connection, and problem solving all in one? We have to go back to the basics of understanding the importance of the brain and why that's so important, which is where we're at today. So I wanted to show you this because I'm going to keep bringing this back up. And I wanted to point out, again, another acronym, but each state has an acronym that helps you remember, gosh, these are the tools that I need to help me with this safety piece. So how do we use that now? Okay, let's say, for example, you're living in survival state, or maybe right now, you're doing some observations, or you've been in a classroom where you've seen a child who may be in this state, okay? And you're going, I see them, I recognize that, I know they're in safety, that they're in survival state. What can I do? Is there anything I can do? Well, yeah, there's some things you can do. We can practice noticing by eye contact and teaching them the different structures of consciousness, the different skills. And so we'll break that down as we start to dive into these sessions. And that's where our focus is going to be during our next session. We're going to focus right here on this piece, and we're going to talk about how we can use these tools in each different brain state, different domain. So I want to take you back. I mentioned the CD-ROM, and I want to take you back to, what's on your CD-ROM. And because I really feel like because I know from personal experience that that's a great starting point to recognize, gosh, man, that is, I need to go there with that. So what is on your CD-ROM from when you were brought up? I've shared a little bit about myself that I know now what I have done with some of my emotions over the years. And I know now that I have some tools that can help me practice it in a different way on my own children. So I want you to think about, what is that? When the world's not going your way, what do you tend to do? Do you lash out at others? Do you blame others for your own upset? What do you do with that? And the other piece where I want to take you is, I don't want you to look at it and go, oh my gosh, I'm a horrible person because I do this. But I want to take you to, this is why I do this, because your parents or whoever raised you, they used the tools that they only knew how to use. And so that's what's been passed down to you. And so that's the starting point. It's like, okay, what do I do with that? What do I do with my own upset? How do I manage my own emotions? I encourage you to, after this session or when you can, just to kind of reflect on that. Jot down, take mental notes, or, if you journal or whatever the case may be, and just kind of write down, what do I do with my own emotions? I encourage you to talk to maybe a peer or a friend or a significant other, whoever, about what you do with your own upset and what that looks like to you. I want to show you this wonderful video. And here's just a, when I first saw this video, I thought, oh my gosh, this is so empowering. But I want you to take in consideration, as soon to be early childhood educators, is that when you are looking at your classroom and you're envisioning that classroom, and this is why I'm so excited to be a part of this journey with you. But when you are going into that, you're in the field because you love to teach, you love children. If you go in to a classroom with this power of love, this power of intention, to see the world from a child's eyes and in their perspective, okay, then that's when you're cultivating. So step one of cultivating that compassionate culture. If you put on that superhero cape that we've been mentioning and you go into the classroom with these glasses on, all right, and if you need those glasses, I can get them to you. But if you go in and with that approach, with that mindset to go, gosh, man, I really can make a difference. You can. I wish I had that. I wish I could have seen, if I would have known to see it from a child's eyes. And I think my classroom would have been a lot better. So I want to share with you Jill Beck's story because she's pretty inspiring. And we'll go ahead and start that for you. 1 second. For some reason, it's not pulling up. Okay. Okay, and here we go.
So I got into teaching because I didn't like teachers. So when I was in 6th grade, I needed to go to the bathroom, and I asked the teacher, and he made this huge deal, because in 6th grade you have like 40-minute class at times, and you're supposed to go in between class periods, but you only have 3 minutes. And he shamed me in front of the class and said I had to give 3 reasons why I needed to go to the bathroom. And then in front of the whole class, he was like, well, unless you're having women issues. So that has stuck with me. When I pushed all that stuff in, it was all that energy was going around in my stomach, and I felt that anxiety. I was just kind of pushing it down and not feeling my emotions, and it would be overwhelming because I wasn't able to release any of that, and then I was told that feeling wasn't okay. I was a tapper, or I took all my pens apart and I put them all back together. I didn't understand what was wrong with me. I wanted to be a teacher that could understand those kids and make their lives have a different experience than I did. I didn't find a teacher that I connected with until I was in high school. And when I did, I was a completely different person. Like, I didn't get good grades. I didn't want to get good grades. I didn't care. But I got an A in her class. And she was the best teacher because she made a connection with me, and we had a relationship. Now, having the skills that I have with conscious discipline, I understand why that worked. I first came to conscious discipline in college. For my student teaching, I was placed with it. You go through all the rooms and you connect with the teachers. And I got into one classroom. It was probably 10 minutes, and I was like, oh, like, you can feel it. You walk in the classrooms and you feel energy. I didn't know what she was doing. And we talked about it, and she said it's conscious discipline. That was just my big aha, like, this is legit. Ever since, I've used it ever since. Over the last 3 years, I've been using conscious discipline, and I know why students are successful. It has nothing to do with curriculum. It has nothing to do with the teacher. It has everything to do with connection. I need to tell you about Gracie. And Gracie is a student that I learned about before I even met her. Gracie, K through 4, had a history of destroying the classroom, flipping the desk, screaming, kicking the teacher, hurting the teacher. Most kids don't have any papers. This child came with all these things that I need to do in order to make sure that she doesn't explode. She had a lot of issues outside of school as well. She would run away from home. She got arrested a couple of times, and she was just really struggling. She was quiet, and we did the things that we usually do in the beginning of the year, trying to get to know each other and establish those first connections. One day she got into a fight at recess, and I was like, Gracie, why don't we have lunch together? And this was right after recess, and she was completely shut down. And so she got her lunch, brought it into my room, and I started just eating my lunch, because at this point she was not ready to talk. And then eventually she popped her head up, and we started talking about the things that we like to do. And I have dogs, and she loves dogs. And so we had a relationship established. The next morning, I'm in my classroom, and I get a buzz. And they said, Gracie wants to come see you. So she came down to my classroom and she told me she had to tell me something. I was like, okay. And she just really started crying. And so then I was just waiting for her, wishing her well and waiting for her to be ready. And I was like, what do you need to tell me, honey? She showed me her arms and she had bruises all over them. And she said, I need help. And so we talked and we talked. She was being physically and just emotionally abused her whole life. And so all of those desk flipping moments, vandalism, all of those things were saying, help me. And so I'm so thankful for that little fight at recess when we talked and we talked and we built a connection so that she thought and she knew she could come and tell me her story. What used to happen is she would get labeled as the bad kid and get pushed into a room all by herself. And so she's just going to destroy it. She didn't have the skills to say, help me. And so she used what she could and she used what she was taught. I wouldn't have had the tools to help her without the skills that conscious discipline taught me about rage, about violence, about crying for help, negative behavior. There's a missing skill and you've got to figure out what that is. Conscious discipline changed her story. And now she's going to have a happier ending than what could have happened.
So I hope you feel inspired through that video. I know I did in the very beginning when I first heard that story, but it's just so, it's just a constant reminder of, you know, just continuing on and just the power of connection and how much we've got to shift. I think in society, we've just got to shift that. If we just see it from someone else's perspective, it changes lives completely. So I always love Jill's story and it's just a great reminder, great motivation to continue on this journey. So just recapping here, and this is where I want to take you, is to understanding, making sure that you're understanding the brain piece, and you know, understanding that our state dictates our behavior, which we have said. And this is, I want to give you just a snapshot of when we're in certain states, what we perceive a situation or an event to be. So I'm going to take you back to that survival state, that clacker state. You know, think about Gracie in that situation. Her threat was at home and she was coming into school with those behaviors. So when we perceive when we're in survival state, we see it as a threat coming after us. So what we do with that is our intent is to punish the behavior. So in a situation, if you've got a teacher that has never practiced any of these skills and they see Gracie flipping the tables, then their natural intent is we want to punish that behavior. So don't do that. You can't do that. That's not safe. Write her up and send her to the office. When we look at the emotional state, we view it as that's an irritation. So if me as the teacher, if I'm in emotional state, it's an irritation for me, and I will stop the behavior. How do I do that? Either stop it myself. If that doesn't work, take the child to the office. I can tell you that was my classroom. You know, it was an emotional state. It was crazy. It was like this all the time. I did not have the skills to help the children that were very challenging in my room. And so I viewed it as an irritation. They were interrupting my day. They were interrupting my routine. Things weren't perfect like I wanted them to be. And so my intent was to stop the behavior, and stopping it for me would be pulling them out of the classroom instead of coaching them through their emotion and looking at them from the executive state of my brain because I wasn't in the executive state of my brain, as a cry for help, just as Jill was able to do with Gracie. And when we're looking at that executive state, our intent is to do nothing negative. It's to help or to teach that child through a moment. but do you see this and why it's so crucial and so important for us adults to maintain that, to just as Jill said, you feel it when you walk into a room. I have felt classrooms, early childhood classrooms, where I have literally walked in the room and I have felt a different feeling, a sense of school family, a sense of connectedness. There's been times I've walked in and as soon as I walk in, I want to leave the room because it's toxic. It's like this all the time. The children are like this, but there's other rooms I have walked in and it's just this, kind of like a woo-saw moment, this feeling of calm. And that's because that specific teacher has seen the need, and he or she has shifted their mindset, and they've cultivated a compassionate culture within their classroom. And so that is when I've seen that it's worked for something like this. This has been around for so long, and I know that there are classrooms that are changing lives. And that's another thing. It just excites me to know that you all are going to have this opportunity. It's just a wonderful thing. So when we're thinking about applying the brain state knowledge, we talked about that, integrating, the one thing we want to remember is when we're integrating, the goal is to integrate the left side and the right side of the brain. We have to have a balance of the two. If we're operating on one side of the brain, then we don't have that balance. So the higher centers of the brain leaves that novelty, whereas the lower centers of our brains leave the sameness and the predictability. So we have to have that balance. So can you think, just to reflect here in your own self, think about where there have been times where you've been like this and you didn't have that balance. And then think about times where you did have this and you had the other side to go, okay, now I see this. We want to look at if we can pull ourselves as adults into that lower centers of our brain. We recognize that, shift our brain up to the higher centers of our brain, then we've cultivated that sense of connectedness, where we're safe, we're safety and connection, and we're doing problem solving, and we're just kind of integrating it all into one. So here's where I want to take you and where I want to leave you. I like to leave in each session. I want to get you with that feeling of angst of what's to come next, but then leave you with a little bit of what can I practice, until we see each other again. So one thing that has become very very helpful in my life since conscious discipline is the Q-tip method. And when I first heard this, I thought, oh my gosh, that is so me. It's totally me. I am notorious for, and have been my entire life up until recently, to wear my feelings on my shoulders. And sometimes I still have that tendency, but I've been able to practice this method for about 4 years now, and it has become so helpful. It's a helpful, quick tip that Dr. Bailey had taught me, and something that I think has become so helpful in my daily life as far as a mother, a wife, a coworker, a daughter, just anybody, and just every role that I have, it's become helpful in my daily life. So in order to teach children a better way, we have to Q-tip. When it comes to noticing lack of skills, we have to see our own missteps as an oops. So Q-tip and oops is where I'm leaving you today. Oops stands for, or Q-tip stands for quit taking it personal. And so what I did in the very beginning of this is when I heard that, and I heard a suggestion to tape the Q-tip to my bathroom mirror, I went home and I did the very same thing, because it was a constant reminder every morning, every evening before I went to bed, that whatever has been said or directed towards me, it was a constant reminder, don't take it personal, that this person is not out to get you. I always like to tell teachers that, especially if you've got some challenging behaviors in the classroom, that this child is not out to get you. They don't lay in bed at night thinking, how can I make Miss So-and-so's life horrible the next day? They're just missing skills. So this is a great reminder. Allow you guys to give opportunity to practice that. OOPS stands for other opportunities to practice self-control. The more we teach children the missing skills, they're successful throughout their day and throughout life. So today you're going to walk away knowing the brain smart, the brain piece, the brain model, and owning that oops, and practicing that Q-tip method. So let's commit. Let's commit today. All right. Are you willing to practice the Q-tip method? And are you willing to allow yourself to oops? And if you are willing, we're going to do this, right? So if you're willing, then I would like for you just to say collectively, I'm willing. All right. So let's commit. I'm willing. And I am so excited to continue on with this journey. And I think that you're going to just absolutely love the information that we're going to bring to you the next session, because we're going to dive deep into starting to break down these different skills. We're going to talk a lot about the power of the connected school family. And just, I'm so excited to bring that session to you. And please contact me if you need any questions, or if the videos didn't work for you, I'll be glad to help you in any way that I can. So without further ado, I will see you for session 3. Thank you.